This is one of my favorite routes, departing Augsburg-Germany, Echo Delta, Mike Alpha, with a relatively short hop across to Austria, landing at Innsbruck, and today I'm in the Beechcraft Bonanza G36, and we'll be giving two G1000 units from FlightSim Builder a full test drive. These FlightSim peripherals are physical representations of the actual units, plus no config required. If you want to know more, check out my review video on the G1000 and the GNS 430, 530 units. Links as always in the notes below. A fairly straightforward route today. After departure we'll be turning to the Maesrack VOR, then tracking to the Tulsi nav waypoint before commencing our arrival and approach into Innsbruck. From Augsburg we're going to be departing runway 07. Now there are standard instrument departures, but ATC have advised that we're to hold runway heading and expect vectors back onto our route. Augsburg has a VOR 115.9, we'll make a note of that. The Maesrack VOR is 115.2, then we're to track direct to Tulsi, which is not only a navigational waypoint, but the beginning of our arrival, the Tulsa 3 Alpha arrival to the Rattenberg NDB Romeo Tango Tango. Now there's no ILS for Innsbruck, but there is an offset localizer, runway 26. This is the SimHanger channel, my name's Mark, thank you very much for watching, and let's get started. Something like this is fairly difficult to film, as the G1000s are physical units. I've had to film them externally with the sim playing in the background. But we're going to be doing all our flying on the G1000s today, so we're not really concerned with looking out the window. These units from FlightSim Builder simply allow you to use physical units or peripherals as opposed to using the mouse with the in-sim dials and knobs. One cool feature, using the rightmost top knob, the volume squelch key, you can vary the intensity of the light behind the soft keys on both units, even if you don't intend to get a unit from FlightSim Builder. No worries, stick around. Although this is not a tutorial by any stretch, we will be covering off various functions and features of the G1000 units. As you're probably aware, most of the dials are twin rotary push buttons, such as those used for nav and for COM. The larger dial at the bottom is often called the outer, and the smaller one on top the inner. In the case of nav and COM, the inner changes the decimals and the outer the whole numbers. The inner dial also operates as a button by pressing it in, allowing you to switch between COM1, COM2, NAV1, NAV2 and so on. The PFD and MFD panels that you're looking at are the pop-out panels from the in-sim instruments. Details on how to do that in my previous video. Let's start by entering our flight plan. We do that by pressing the FPL button and it brings up a sub-menu, as shown on the MFD. Press in the inner button and it brings up a highlight cursor. Then using the outer dial we can use that to scroll. We'll place the cursor underneath the origin to enter our departure, then just turn the inner dial to bring up another menu. And this is where we can enter the details. Now you can enter both letters and numbers by rotating the dials, but using my mouse I'm going to click on this small icon here, which is a keyboard icon, which will allow me to enter the data on the keyboard directly. Echo Delta Mike Alpha. There it is, and it comes up Augsburg. That's correct. Happy with that, and press enter to enter that information into the flight plan. We now have the option to enter a runway. Not necessary, but we know our runway is 07 today. Using the inner dial we'll select that and enter again. Now I'm going to go ahead and enter my destination, which is Innsbruck, Lima, Oscar, Whiskey, India, following exactly the same process. And to save me time from rotating the dials and selecting the Lima, Oscar, Whiskey, India, I'll use the keyboard again. Comes up Innsbruck, I'm happy with that. Select enter. Once again it asks us for the runway. We know that it's runway 26. I'll select that and once again select enter. We now have our departure and arrival airports on our flight plan. The first leg of our flight plan had us going to the VOR Mike Alpha Hotel, Maesrack. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that, following exactly the same process as before. And again I'll right click on the keyboard to save me a bit of time. Now type in Mike Alpha Hotel. That's it, press enter. Now there's more than one VOR with that code. Obviously the one we want is in Germany. Enter to select and we're done. Our next point is Tulsi, but it's also the beginning of our arrival into Innsbruck. It is a published STAR, or Standard Terminal Arrival Route, and we can enter that into our flight plan as well by selecting the prog button. Various options are available. Using the outer dial, we're going to choose Select Arrival. Then from the submenu, we're going to use the inner dial to scroll down to the one we want, which is the Tulsi 3 Alpha. There it is. Select Enter. The information displayed is a summary. That all looks correct. Use the outer dial to scroll down to Load. There it is, and hit Enter, and it's in our flight plan. We can do a visual check of that. Hit the FPL button again to take away the flight plan details, and using the range dial, we can zoom out, and that's all looking correct. From Tulsi to the Rattenberg NDB, then on to our destination. We're not quite finished yet. We know that it's a localizer approach, runway 26. Let's enter that by hitting the prog button, select approach, and in this case it's the localizer R26. So as before, we'll scroll, select the appropriate procedure, and once again press enter. We then get an option: are we going to be vectored by ATC to the localizer or via the NDB? Well, we know we're going directly from the NDB, going to take us to Adwig, and then we'll start our descent and our final approach. I've selected the NDB, have the choice to enter the minimums here. I will do so on this occasion, so I'll change the setting to Barrow, and now I can enter my minimums, which in this case I know is 2250. And I know this because I've consulted the chart. So now it's a matter of turning the inner dial to select that altitude. I must say, so far I find the FlightSim Builder units faultless in their operation. It's a slightly bigger screen than InSim and easier to manage and find your way around. If you're one of those that like the realism of tactile feedback and immersion, then these units have a fair amount to offer. That's it, we're done with our flight plan. Localizer now entered. That's the hard work done now. Let's now prep for departure. Obviously you wouldn't do this normally on the runway. I've just chosen to be on the runway with the engines running, save the battery, and for brevity. Turning now to the PFD, multitude of functions available. I've selected the transponder soft key, and now I can go ahead and enter a transponder code. I've entered 4456. We'll assume that's the one given to us by ATC, and as we'll be departing shortly, I'm going to leave it on altitude reporting. We can now go ahead and enter our nav info. Our first leg terminates at Mike Alpha Hotel, a VOR 115.2, using a combination of the inner and outer dials. That's now entered. Select the switch soft key and it becomes the active. We're also aware that the nav for Augsburg is 115.9. ATC have told us to hold runway heading. They may tell us for a certain distance, so we'll enter that into the Nav1 radio as well, so we can track our distance on departure from the airport. And I'll switch that to make it the active initially. 115.9 is showing, and Augsburg. We can display this information on the PFD. I selected back to get back to the main menu, then PFD options. Now I'm going to select DME. And it shows the current Nav1 active frequency 115.9 and our distance from that nav station, which is 0.5 of a nautical mile. That's done. The other navigational information we'll need on the route is the Rattenberg NDB. So using the soft keys on the PFD, I'm going to select the ADF, and the frequency required for this ADF is 303. So I'll go ahead and enter that in, and then select enter to swap the frequencies and make it active. We're too far away at the moment for it to show up, but later on in the flight we can activate it and make the NDB pointer visible. We can now go ahead and enter our altitude using either one of the altitude dials, outer for thousands, inner for hundreds. For simplicity, I'm just going to select 9,500 feet. Which is our approach altitude. In the real world, of course, as this is an IFR flight now, This would typically be something like 9,000 or 11,000. ATC have instructed us to maintain runway heading on initial departure. By pushing in the heading button, it automatically sets it to the direction that we're facing, which in this case is directly down the runway. I am using live weather today, so we need to set the barometer pressure, and I can find that fairly quickly and easily using the G1000. From my flight plan, select your starting point, activate the cursor, and the META is shown. And the current pressure is 1021 hectopascals. And I can set this on the PDF. There we are, 1021. ATC have now given us clearance for takeoff. On the PDF we can set a timer if we want to, always a good idea. Move the cursor over to start and hit enter. And our timer starts. Hit the timer F button again to take the submenu away, and we can see our counter counting up. Okay, let's get away. We're up and away, gear is up. I've hit the AP button to engage the autopilot and heading mode, and using the VS or vertical speed, I've set my climb to 800 feet per minute. As instructed by ATC, I'm maintaining runway heading 68 degrees, and the DME on the PDF is showing 1.5 nautical miles. We'll continue our climb, hold this heading until instructed otherwise. Flaps up, just pulling back slightly on the prop so I don't overstress the engine. We're now just over 3 nautical miles from the airport, and ATC have instructed us to turn right on heading 150. This wasn't unexpected. Augsburg is a fairly busy airport. There's probably faster traffic departing behind us, so ATC are getting us out of the way. We're continuing our climb to 9,500 feet, and we'll maintain this heading until advised by ATC. Now nearing 4,000 feet, a further instruction from ATC to proceed direct to Maastricht. That's easily done. Pull up the flight plan. Maastricht is the next point, highlighted in magenta. Press the Direct To button. Yes, that's correct. We'll scroll down to Activate and then press Enter. And you'll see the magenta line has automatically changed and is now showing from our current position directly to the VOR. Press the Nav button, and on the PDF, GPS is displayed in green to show that it's active, and our HSI is showing that we're in GPS mode, and this is selected by pressing the CDI button on the PFD. We're now at 4,500 feet, and I'm going to reduce the rate of climb so I can maintain a safe speed. And you can see out the window why it's an IFR flight plan. Visibility currently is 0. As we're in Germany, the transition altitude is 5,000 feet, and we're just crossing into transition, so I'll set the barometer to 1013 hectopascals, which is standard. And this will ensure I fly at the correct altitude above transition for the remainder of the flight. Looks like the weather is starting to clear up very slightly, and it looks like we're going to get just above the clouds, which is going to make the flying a whole lot easier. It is quite turbulent at the moment. Airspace must be fairly busy at the moment. We are getting closer to Munich. ATC are interrupting our flight plan once again, and we've been instructed to turn left, heading 100. I've dialed that in with the heading dial and changed from nav to heading mode, and we'll maintain this course until instructed otherwise by ATC. ATC have been back onto us and told us to turn back en route and continue our navigation. I've selected the nav button. A note on the PDF, GPS is shown in white, not green. We're still in heading mode. The GPS mode will only activate when we're closer to the magenta line, and we're currently heading away from it. So as we're in heading mode, now adjusting my heading back towards the magenta line. When the GPS mode activates, it'll turn green and heading will disappear, so we'll keep our eye on that. The VOR at Maastricht is 115.2. We entered that prior to departure, so I've now switched that to active, and it indicates we're 4 nautical miles away from the VOR. or the end of our first leg. We're now getting pretty close to the magenta line, and on the PDF the GPS is now highlighted to show that it's picked it up, and it's now turned green, so we're now back in nav mode. Heading mode has been disabled, and the aircraft will automatically turn us back on track to align us with the original route. Here we go, the aircraft's starting to bank now. We're continuing our climb to 9,500 feet and just past 7,000. Once overhead Mazrak, we'll track directly on GPS to Tulsi, making sure that we stick to our assigned altitude of 9,500 feet. We're now overhead Tulsi, continuing on GPS and about to enter the Austrian Alps. We're cruising at 9,500 feet, pretty turbulent, but visibility has improved considerably. We've just passed Tulsi on our way to Rattenberg, and ATC have instructed us to hold at the NDB. We're going to have to wait for other aircraft to come in before we'll be allowed to continue on our localizer approach. To enter hold mode, select flight plan, highlight the hold point, which is Romeo Tango Tango. We press the menu button, and from the selection we're going to scroll down and choose hold at waypoint. Select enter. ATC would have given us instructions for hold, but not in this instance as it's a published procedure. So we can now set up the parameters, and we know it's inbound heading 225. So we'll just dial that in. Using the inner knob, we can move in 1 degree increments. Also make sure the setting is set for inbound, which it is. The leg length is 1 minute, so that's fine. And it's a right turn. Happy with all that, we can scroll down, highlight load, and then hit enter. And that hold has now been entered into our flight plan. And we can see that displayed just below the Romeo Tango Tango. As it's now entered in our flight plan, the GPS will track it for us. We'll be maintaining the minimum altitude of 9,500 feet over the NDB and for the hold. We dialed in the frequency for the non-directional beacon earlier. I can now get that to display on the HSI by selecting the bearing 1 soft key and then cycling through until I get the ADF. And on the HSI we can see the blue pointer indicating the direction of Romeo Tango Tango Rattenberg NDB, or non-directional beacon. When we take a look at our approach, we can see the localizer has many defined waypoints or fixes. This is because we're descending with mountains all around us. We need to check that the altitudes in the flight plan match the charts, which we can see above here. To check that, I'm going to select flight plan, activate my cursor and scroll down to the relevant waypoints which are shown in the chart and which will be in the flight plan. We can see the NDB has 9,500 feet, as does Adwig. As per the charts are all good there, but note as we check the other fixes, we don't have altitude entered. There are defined minimums for getting through the mountains. However, we can highlight by scrolling with the outer knob, then with the inner knob, we can then go ahead and enter the relevant altitudes. For Lock 17, it's 8,700 feet, so entered that, hit enter, and we continue to do this until they've all been entered, which we've now done. All good so far. I've also scrolled all the way to the end of the flight plan to highlight the METAR for Innsbruck. Note it's 1021 hextopixels. We'll need this during our approach. A quick check on our map indicates we are now entering our holding pattern, and will remain in that pattern until ATC gives us clearance. Our GPS will hold us here until we instruct it otherwise. If we have a look at our PDF, just select back to the main menu, we can see the suspend menu item is highlighted, indicating our flight plan is suspended and will remain suspended until we select the soft key to take it off. Then the GPS will continue with its normal route. Whilst we remain in the hold waiting for ATC clearance, if we select Map HSI on the PDF, a number of options are available, including Insert Map, which is just a smaller version of what's shown on the multifunction display, or we can select HSI Map, and the map is displayed directly within the HSI. ATC have just contacted me and said we're now cleared for the approach, so we can come out of hold, and we do this by pressing the suspension soft key. And as mentioned earlier, we'll resume normal GPS mode once we're overhead the NDB, and as per the flight plan, we'll be heading to Adwig. We're now on our way to Adwig, and it's time to prepare for our approach. The localizer frequency is 111.10, which was auto-tuned on nav2, but I'm going to tune it into nav1 and do the localizer approach on nav1. That's it dialed in, and now select it as the active. Continuing my preparations, I've now selected heading mode, made sure my heading is directly to Adwig. I'm 1.2 nautical miles away. Now going to select the CDI soft key and change to localizer 1, which was set on nav1 frequency. That's my 111.10, and now I've pressed the approach button. And you need to do this before the descent, otherwise chances are it won't engage. Localizer has been picked up, indicated in green on the HSI, and the glide slope is indicating next to the altitude tape. Now we could have set the descent angle at 3.77 degrees, which is required for Innsbruck, but we don't need to worry about that as we entered the individual altitudes which the GPS will adhere to. And now it's just a matter of us monitoring our airspeed and our alignment with the localizer on the HSI and the glide slope indicator. When we're on the glide slope, we'll see the GS light up, and it will be displayed on the PDF. There it goes. We've captured the glide slope. And we can see on the altimeter our descent has started. Just passing Loch 17, altitude is spot on, and when you look out the window it's clearly understandable why there's such rigid altitude restrictions in areas such as this. Flaps one stage down to help me control my airspeed. It's pretty windy with a bit of turbulence, so I won't be going for full flap for landing. I'll get thrown around just too much with full flap. Continuing my descent now, just passing 6,000 feet, and we'll soon be at transition altitude, so time to dial that in. It's 1021. There we go. On the glide slope, on the localizer, all looking good. Flaps one stage down. Speed, I'm looking for something in the region of about 110 knots at this stage. Fortunately, the visibility has improved considerably and we now have the runway in sight. ATC have cleared us for landing runway 26, visual approach, but I'm going to stay on the localizer. For now it'll just be a small left turn to line up with the runway. Gear down, prop and mixture adjusted as necessary, and we're now coming over Innsbruck itself. Well, I have to say that the FlightSim Builder G1000 units have operated faultlessly. Basically, if you can do it in sim, well, you can do it on these units. And the fact that you don't have to configure anything is a big plus in my book, as is the tactile feedback. I thoroughly enjoyed this flight. If you want to know more about FlightSim Builder and their G1000 or GNS 530 units, link in the notes below. And I hope that you enjoyed the flight as well and found it useful. As always, thank you very much for joining me. Stay well, look after yourselves. I'll see you all again very soon. And bye for now.